We're here with Dr Stacy Hope, Managing Director of Women in Mining UK and also partner at ERM. Now, Stacy, you have just facilitated the first fireside chat of this year's Natural Resources Forum ESG conference, which you held with Mark Cutifani. Do you have any initial thoughts coming out of that chat?
Well, it was great that Mark agreed to do the fireside chat, and with me, of all people. I think what I loved about it was the journey that he took us through. So from Anglo, now with Vale, and actually it was almost a full circle, his initial engagement with Vale at the beginning of his career to where he is now as chairman on the board, and what that actually means in terms of critical minerals and where we see the energy transition going. And I have a few key takeaways from that because it was such a poignant conversation, quite a number of points that he made. I think the first was around the communities in which we engage and how we look at communities and how we define them. And we often leave subsectors or subsections of those communities out of the conversation. So his faith-based organization point, which he was going to skip past, and I said, no, let's talk about that. Because I also reflected on my own engagement with faith-based organizations and how they can be integral to unlocking some of the barriers that we experience, whether it's mining or agriculture or any major industry going into communities. And I think that was one. Really look at your community and engage with all and be respectful and make sure that it's a dialectic engagement as opposed to one-sided. We need your trust. So this is what we're doing, as opposed to, well, actually, we both need to trust each other. We both need to come up with solutions, or we both need to have an understanding as to what the expectations are within the industry and for the future. So for me, that was one of the key takeaways. But the second, which actually came from an audience member's question, was around looking at our operations and investing in innovation, investing in efficiency, and how that can drive ESG. We often don't think about that, and those who do have probably had a long career in the industry. But looking at the climate now in mining and how many junior miners are coming to the fore, having companies think early on about if building efficiencies into their mine design and also their mine closure will help drive ESG. So a few things, I'm sure he said a lot more, I know he did, but really enjoyed it, and I think it was such a great conversation to have at this year's Natural Resource Forum.
I totally agree, and I think with that, just reflecting on some of that key message of good sustainability is actually good business. So looking for those efficiencies, many of which he put in place or instigated within Anglo-American, such as the need not to have to grind the rock down to mud and instead just down to a grain of sand, which is actually a significant difference. Aspects like that.
Oh yeah, I love the analogies as well, because I'm a non-technical miner. I'm not even a miner, but I'm a miner, let's say that. So I think explaining how he's built efficiencies into Anglo was a great way for other miners to think about, well, what are the other technologies that are out there that we haven't even thought of? What parts of the business have we not actually costed in terms of the inaction to building efficiencies and building innovation into it? Even procurement, for example, or I guess health and safety. Are we doing enough in terms of building efficiencies there? And so I think that conversation had me thinking much broader as well. It allowed for a much more holistic thought process around ESG, but ESG within the context of future-proofing the mining sector.
Absolutely, and I think that sort of really leans into from a sustainability perspective, it's almost what's your sparkle, what's your superpower as an organization? So what can you do as a mining company that actually nobody else can do, or maybe it's your competitive advantage, and how does that lean into that sustainability aspect?
Absolutely, and how are we sharing?
Yeah.
Right? Because this is something that we don't do enough of. We don't talk about, well, this is what we're doing, what are you doing? We'll do it in very small groups. ICMM, it's a very small group, so think 22, 23 miners, there might be more now. But that is just a microcosm of the mining sector. And if we're not all exposed to those conversations, we don't really know what else is out there, especially at that level of mining, at the major level. And we can't just think that juniors belong in this junior box. We need to really share and engage across the board. And I think that was one of the things that I got as well from Mark, this need to be collaborative, but not just collaborative amongst ourselves.
Yes.
In us little pockets.
Yeah. Being brave enough to actually listen to those who are not necessarily normally invited to that table. And something that I found really interesting to hear was when he was reflecting on the faith group and all of that work, and other members of the ICMM perhaps not agreeing with that, and him saying, look, this has got nothing to do with religion and everything to do with understanding the perspectives and what's important to different stakeholder groups.
Absolutely. And yeah, that was such a great point. And I could see it happening, right? Because everyone's like, oh, well, religion. But what is religion to those communities? Across Africa, religion plays a major role in building societies, galvanizing communities, but also determining rhetorics across various jurisdictions. We have certain groups who will think, I mean, if we look at a country like Mali, for example, predominantly Islamic, women were not allowed to go onto the mines. You had mining companies who engaged with governments, who talked around, well, these are the efficiencies in mining that women can bring, that we haven't had before. And actually, if we look at from the community lens, this is how women in the industry can drive further growth and development. And then you had the Malian government actually saying, well, let's have a conversation. But there had to be a starting point from respect for thought, respect for religion, because religion played a part in that thought, and respect for the culture around. Because religion is not culture, religion helps to shape it, but it's not culture. So how do we then take what we know from a level of respect, mutual understanding, and build a new culture where mining can be positive change? So many lovely little nuggets.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. And so from your perspective, Stacey, because the conference goes on for the rest of the week, are there any other aspects you're looking forward to hearing about or you're anticipating might be discussed?
Absolutely. The things that I don't know a lot about, let's say that, because I'm a social scientist and I enjoy working between social science and climate. A lot of my work has to do with climate resilience and climate risks, but how do we embed a gendered approach? How do we embed an indigenous approach or an indigenous perspective into how we develop climate resilient models? So I'm looking forward to hearing a lot around climate change and climate resilience from the mining sector, really wanting to hear how the sector is evolving in terms of how we're safeguarding it. But maybe there's something around maybe scope 4, if someone talks about scope 4 in this. I think it threw us all off when Mark said, maybe it's not about scope 3. Maybe we shouldn't be focusing too much attention. He didn't say don't focus on it. He said, maybe we're focusing too much attention on scope 3. Maybe the next conversation is scope 4, whatever that is, however we define it.
Yeah, and that's interesting, isn't it? Because we get into that world of jargon,
exactly.
And some people's scope 3 is all of it beyond the scope 1 and 2, and for others they like to segment it. But all of this, absolutely fantastic. I think the conversation that you led today was brilliant, so thank you very much, and looking forward to the rest of the week.
Same here.
Thank you.